Welcome to this powerful and unforgettable story. Today, we are going to walk through the life of a little girl who never got the chance to grow up. But her words touched the hearts of millions. She didn't live to see freedom, but she wrote about the world she dreamed of. Her name was Anne Frank. This is not just a story about war, hiding, and fear. This is a story about a girl who believed in hope when the world was burning. About a girl who used a diary to stay alive in her heart, even when everything outside was trying to kill her. You will see how a young girl's words became more powerful than any weapon. You will learn how one voice, even in silence, can echo across history. And yes, this video is also great for your English learning, because it is written in very simple English, and every line is clear, emotional, and powerful. So you will feel the story in your heart, and you will improve your English at the same time. So now, let's begin the story of Anne Frank. Part 1. The Girl Before the Diary. Anne Frank was born on June 12, 1929, in Frankfurt, Germany. She was just like any other girl. She loved to laugh, she loved to talk, and she was always curious. Her full name was Anneliese Marie Frank. People called her Anne, pronounced An. She had an older sister named Margot and parents named Otto and Edith Frank. Her family was Jewish, but they were not strict about religion. They were modern. They believed in education, kindness, and community. Her father, Otto Frank, was a businessman. He had served in World War I and was very respectful and gentle. Anne loved her father deeply, and you'll see why later in the story. Her mother, Edith, was quiet, proper, and deeply loving, though Anne often had a difficult relationship with her. Anne and Margot were different. Margot was calm, serious, and always polite. Anne was energetic, talkative, and always asking questions. She was very smart. She was always top of her class in school, especially in writing. Even at a young age, her teachers said she had a gift with words. She wanted to become a writer, or a movie star, or both. But something dark was growing in Germany. In 1933, when Anne was just 4 years old, Adolf Hitler became the leader of Germany, and everything changed. Hitler hated Jewish people. He blamed them for Germany's problems after World War I. His party, the Nazis, began passing dangerous laws to take away rights from Jewish people. They were not allowed to go to certain schools. They couldn't own businesses. They were treated like enemies in their own country. Anne's family felt the danger early. Her father, Otto, was smart. He knew what could happen. So, in 1934, they moved to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. They thought they would be safe there. Anne was just 5 years old when they left Germany. She had to leave her home, her friends, and everything she knew. But in Amsterdam, Anne started to build a new life. In Amsterdam, the Frank family felt free again, for a little while. Otto started a business called Opekta, which sold ingredients for making jam. They lived in a peaceful neighborhood and sent Anne and Margot to good schools. Anne made many friends. She was always smiling, always chatting, and full of energy. She loved books, movies, boys, and jokes. Her teachers said, "She talks too much, but she's bright." Anne knew she was different. She didn't want a normal life. She wanted adventure and freedom. She kept a notebook where she wrote short stories. She wrote letters to imaginary friends. She loved to imagine a better world. Her dream was to become a famous writer. But behind the scenes, the world was changing again. The Nazis were moving across Europe. And in 1940, Germany invaded the Netherlands. Now Anne was 11 years old. The Germans took control of the Netherlands. And very slowly, life for Jews became dangerous again. New rules started coming. Jewish children were forced to leave their schools. Jewish families had to register and wear a yellow Star of David on their clothes. Jewish people were banned from parks, libraries, and cinemas. They were no longer safe. Anne and Margot had to say goodbye to their non-Jewish friends. Anne's world became smaller every month. Otto tried to protect his family, but the walls were closing in. They had one choice: hide. And then, something happened that forced them to act fast. On July 5th, 1942, Anne's sister Margot received a letter. It was a call-up notice. The Nazis wanted her to report for a work camp. But everyone knew what that meant. They weren't sending Jews to work. They were sending them to death camps. Otto looked at the paper. Then he looked at his wife and daughters, and he said just one thing: "We go into hiding, now." The family packed their bags that night. They wore layers of clothes to avoid suspicion. They left behind their cat, their furniture, and their neighbors. And the next morning, July 6th, 1942, the Frank family disappeared. Where did they go? That's where the real story begins. Because inside that hiding place, Anne would write the words that would survive forever. Part 2. The Secret Annex. Life in Hiding. On July 6th, 1942, just one day after Margot got the letter from the Nazis, the Frank family vanished from the outside world. But they didn't go far. Otto Frank had been preparing a hiding place for months, just in case this day would come. It was inside the building where his business was located, at 263 Prinsengracht, Amsterdam. Behind a swinging bookcase hidden from the world, there was a secret apartment. This small and dark space became their new home. It was called the Secret Annex. The annex was not a full house. It was a few small rooms with no sunlight, no space, and no way out. And they would have to live there in total silence. For years. Anne was 13 years old when she entered the annex. She had just received a birthday gift a few weeks earlier. A diary. It was red and white, checkered, and she called it Kitty. From this day forward, she would write in it almost every day. That diary would one day tell the world the truth. The secret annex had more than just the Frank family. 1 week after they moved in, another family joined them. The Van Pels. Herman Van Pels. He had worked with Otto. Auguste Van Pels, his wife, who often argued with Anne's mother. Peter Van Pels, their 16-year-old son. Quiet, shy, and unsure. Later, a dentist named Fritz Pfeffer joined them. Anne had to share a room with him. She didn't like him at all. In her diary, she called him Mr. Dussel. Now there were 8 people living in that tiny space. No one could go outside. No one could open the windows. No one could flush the toilet during the day. Even footsteps had to be soft, like whispers. They were hiding from death, and every noise could give them away. Anne's life in hiding was not like a normal life. Every minute had rules. In the morning, they had to be completely quiet. Workers were downstairs in the building, and any noise could expose them. They could not talk, walk loudly, or move chairs. They would sit still for hours, reading, writing, or thinking. Their food came from kind employees who worked for Otto Frank. 4 brave Dutch people risked their lives to help. Miep Gies, Jan Gies, Victor Kugler, Johannes Kleiman. These people brought them bread, potatoes, books, and news of the outside world. They were the reason the 8 people in the annex survived for 2 years. In the afternoon, when the office workers left, they could move a little more. Anne read books, studied languages, wrote stories, and dreamed of the future. But the one thing she did every single day was write in her diary. Her words were honest, emotional, and deep. She wrote about the fear of being found, her fights with her mother, her love for her father, her loneliness, her dreams of freedom, her feelings for Peter. She didn't just write events. She wrote feelings. She wrote like someone much older than 13. And she hoped. One day the war would end, and people would read her words. In the beginning, Anne and Peter Van Pels didn't get along. She thought he was boring and quiet. But as months passed, things changed. They were the only teenagers in the annex, and they were both lonely. They began to talk more. Then one day, Peter kissed Anne. Anne wrote in her diary, "He's so sweet. I wish he loved me as much as I love him." They sat together in the attic, looked out at the blue sky, and talked about life. But Anne also doubted her feelings. She didn't know if it was real love, or just 2 people trying to feel alive in a world filled with death. Still, that little relationship gave Anne some warmth during the cold, silent days. While the world was collapsing outside, Anne's mind was expanding inside. She read books about history, philosophy, and politics. She studied the war. She imagined what she would do if she were free. She didn't just want to survive. She wanted to become someone. Anne wrote, "I want to go on living even after my death. That's why I write." She believed that words could survive longer than bodies. She wanted to use her pain to create something beautiful. And slowly, her diary turned from private pages to something bigger, something meant for the world. Inside the annex, there were no phones, no internet, no newspapers. But Otto and the others used a small radio to listen to secret updates. They heard the Nazis were taking more Jews to concentration camps. Bombs were falling across Europe. The Allies, USA, UK, Soviet Union, were fighting back. Sometimes Anne heard good news, and she'd feel hopeful. But other times, she'd hear that friends had been taken away, never to return. Her heart broke again and again. But she never stopped believing that peace would come. In 1944, a Dutch government minister who escaped to London made a radio broadcast. He said that after the war, people should collect letters and diaries from those who lived through it. Anne heard this on the radio, and something inside her changed. She decided to rewrite her diary, to polish it, to turn it into a real book. She gave it a title, The Secret Annex. She wanted people to know the truth, not just about her, but about all the people who were suffering in silence. She worked every day, editing, rewriting, and dreaming of the day the world would read her words. But just when it seemed the end of the war was near, something terrible happened. On August 4th, 1944, after more than 2 years in hiding, the door to the secret annex was broken down. A man named Karl Silberbauer, a Nazi officer, found them. No one knows exactly how, but someone had betrayed them. Some believe it was a neighbor. Others think it was someone in the building. To this day, no one knows for sure. The 8 people were arrested. The helpers were arrested too, but later released. Anne's diary was left behind on the floor. But Miep Gies found it, and she hid it, hoping to return it to Anne after the war. But that moment would never come. Anne Frank, Margot, Otto, Edith, Peter, the Van Pels, and Mr. Pfeffer were all taken away. Their long silence was over. Now they would face something even worse. The concentration camps. Part 3. The camps, a race against death. Anne was just 15 years old. She had lived in silence for over 2 years. She had not seen trees, or sky, or stars. But she had dreamed of freedom, believed in hope, and written her heart into pages. And then, in just a few minutes, all of it was gone. That day, Nazi officers stormed the secret annex. They found Anne, Margot, her parents, Peter, his parents, and Mr. Pfeffer. They arrested them like criminals. The people who had helped them, Miep Gies and the others, were also taken, but released later. Anne stood there, terrified, her body shaking. Her diary was on the floor. Her life, the one she had shared in pages, stayed behind. She didn't know it yet, but that diary would survive. She wouldn't. After the arrest, the 8 people were taken to Westerbork, a temporary prison camp in the Netherlands. It wasn't yet the worst place, but it was still horrible. Overcrowded rooms, no privacy, loud, angry guards, food that was dirty and cold, showers with cold water, constant fear of being sent east. East meant Auschwitz, and everyone knew what that meant. Death. At Westerbork, Anne and the others were called criminals because they hid from the Nazis. So they were given the hardest jobs. Anne had to carry heavy stones. Margot had to move wet mattresses filled with lice. The rooms were filled with rats and bugs. Every day was loud, dirty, and hopeless. But Anne didn't give up. She still had dreams. She believed the war would end soon. They stayed in Westerbork for about a month. Then, their names were put on the list for transport. It was the last list anyone wanted to be on. On September 3rd, 1944, Anne and the others were forced onto a cattle train, packed with over 1,000 people. There were no seats, no food, no air, no light, just screaming, crying, praying, and silence. They traveled for 3 days. No one knew where they were going. Children fainted. Old people died. People stood for hours without moving. Anne held Margot's hand. Edith whispered to her daughters. Otto stayed calm, trying to protect everyone with his presence. Finally, the train stopped. The doors opened, and they arrived at Auschwitz. Auschwitz was not a prison. It was a factory of death. It had gas chambers, crematoriums where bodies were burned, watchtowers, and fences of electricity. Anne and the others stood on the platform. SS guards with guns and dogs shouted orders. Doctors pointed left or right, life or death. Old people and children were sent straight to the gas chambers. Strong men and women were sent to work. That day, the group was separated forever. Otto Frank, being a man, was sent to the men's camp. Anne, Margot, and Edith were sent to the women's camp. Peter, his parents, and Mr. Pfeffer were also divided. That was the last time Anne saw her father. Auschwitz was a place with barbed wire that shocked people. Guards who beat for no reason. Dogs that attacked prisoners. Diseases that spread fast. No soap, no medicine, no kindness. Anne and Margot's heads were shaved. They were given prison uniforms. Thin, dirty, full of lice. No underwear, no shoes, just pain. They had to wake up at 4 a.m., stand for hours in the cold, and go to work in fields or factories. They were given black water for coffee and a piece of moldy bread per day. Anne became sick, but she tried to stay strong. She comforted other girls, told them stories, and tried to make people smile, even in that hell. But her mother, Edith, was falling apart. Edith Frank was not strong like Anne or Margot. She was sensitive. She worried all the time. And now she was watching her daughters suffer. She gave her bread to Anne. She gave her scarf to Margot. She slept on the cold floor without blankets. In January 1945, just weeks before Auschwitz was liberated by Russian soldiers, Edith Frank died from starvation. Anne never got to say goodbye. In late October 1944, Anne and Margot were moved again, this time to Bergen-Belsen, another concentration camp in Germany. Why? Because the Nazis were moving prisoners away from the front lines. The Allies were getting closer, so they moved the girls to a camp that was less organized, but still deadly. Anne hoped Otto and Peter had also been moved. She didn't know they were still in Auschwitz. At Bergen-Belsen, things were even worse. There were no gas chambers in Bergen-Belsen, but people still died. Every hour, every day. The camp was filled with filth, freezing cold, no water, no toilets, diseases like typhus. There were thousands of bodies lying around, unburied. People died on the floor, and no one came to help. Anne and Margot were covered in lice. They had no strength left to eat. They were cold, shaking, and too weak to cry. Still, Anne tried to give hope to Margot. But then, one day, Margot fell from her bed in the barracks. She couldn't get up. She died from exhaustion and sickness. Anne saw it happen, and after that, she gave up too. After Margot died, Anne had nothing left. She was alone. She was sick. She had no idea the war would end just weeks later. She had lost her sister, her mother, her voice, her hope. In February or early March 1945, Anne Frank died of typhus just days after Margot. She was 15 years old. She died in a camp filled with death, pain, and silence. Her body was thrown into a mass grave. No stone, no name, no goodbye. But her words had already survived. The war ended in May 1945. The camps were liberated. The Nazis were defeated. But only one person from the secret annex came back: Otto Frank. He returned to Amsterdam alone. He waited for news of his wife, his daughters, his friends. But slowly, the truth came. They were all dead. Then, one day, Miep Gies came to Otto. She handed him a small bundle of papers. It was Anne's diary. She had saved it from the annex floor the day they were arrested. Otto began to read it, and for the first time, he saw who his daughter truly was. Part 4. The Diary That Changed the World. Anne Frank's Forever Voice. After the war ended in May 1945, Europe was silent in a strange way. The bombs had stopped. The camps were opened, but families were broken forever. Otto Frank returned to Amsterdam alone. He waited. Every day he hoped to hear good news. Maybe Edith survived. Maybe Anne and Margot were alive. But slowly, letter by letter, name by name, hope disappeared. First he learned about Edith's death, then Margot, and finally, Anne. Otto was completely broken. He had lost his wife. He had lost both daughters. He had lost everything. Then one day, Miep Gies came to him. She carried a bundle of papers tied together. She said softly, "These are Anne's." It was Anne's diary, the same diary Anne received on her 13th birthday, the same diary she called Kitty. Otto took it home. At first, he could not open it. It was too painful. But one day, he began to read, and with every page, Otto met his daughter again. Otto thought he knew Anne. He knew she was lively. He knew she talked a lot. He knew she was intelligent. But the Anne in the diary was deeper, stronger, and wiser than he ever imagined. She wrote about fear, loneliness, growing up, her body changing, her thoughts about life and death, her anger, her hope, her belief in goodness. Otto read lines that shocked him. Anne had written, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." Otto cried. He realized something powerful. Anne did not just write a diary. She wrote a message to humanity. She wanted people to understand what war does to children, what hate does to the innocent, why freedom matters, why silence is dangerous. Otto knew then, the world must read this. Otto Frank decided to fulfill Anne's dream. Anne had written in her diary that she wanted to be a writer. She wanted her words to live after her death. So Otto began the difficult work of editing her diary. He carefully prepared it for publication. He removed some very personal parts. He combined different versions Anne had written. He stayed true to Anne's voice. In 1947, the diary was published in Dutch. The title was The Diary of a Young Girl. At first, only a few people read it, but those who did, they could not forget it. Slowly, the diary spread across the world. It was translated into English, French, German, Spanish, and many more languages. Eventually, it was translated into more than 70 languages. Millions of people read Anne's words. Children read it in schools. Adults read it and cried. Survivors felt seen. The world listened. Anne Frank became one of the most important voices of the Holocaust. Not because she was famous, but because she was honest. She was not a hero with a weapon. She was a girl with a pen. And her pen was stronger than hate. The building at 263 Prinsengracht still stood. The hiding place was still there. People wanted to see it, to feel the silence, to understand how 8 people lived for 2 years without freedom. So it became the Anne Frank House Museum. Today, people walk through the rooms. They see the hidden bookcase. They see Anne's room. They read her quotes on the walls. Visitors come from every country. They don't come to see history. They come to feel it. Anne Frank never grew up. She never became a writer in the normal way. She never fell in love fully. She never lived freely. But her life was not wasted. Her words, teach children about kindness, warn the world about hate, remind us why freedom matters. Anne Frank became a symbol of innocent lives lost, of courage in silence, of hope in darkness. She showed the world something very important. You don't need power to change history. You need truth. Anne Frank is not just a story from the past. Her story is a warning. Hate does not start with violence. It starts with words, with separation, with silence. Anne reminds us to speak when others are silent, to protect the innocent, to never forget. She was just a girl, but the world will never forget her. Anne once wrote that she wanted to live on after her death. She did. Every time someone opens her diary, Anne Frank lives again. Every time someone learns kindness instead of hate, Anne Frank wins. Her body was destroyed, but her voice survived. And it always will. 7 life-changing lessons from the story of Anne Frank. 1. Your voice is powerful. Even in silence. Anne was only a teenager. She had no freedom, no platform, no stage, but she had a pen. And that pen told the truth. Honestly, fearlessly. Even when the world tried to silence her, her words lived on. Lesson: you don't need to be famous to be heard. Write, speak, share, even if you're scared. 2. Kindness can exist even in darkness. The people who helped the Frank family, Miep Gies and the others, risked their lives to hide them. They didn't do it for money. They did it because it was right. Lesson: even when the world feels dark, there are always good people. Be one of them. 3. Hate begins with words, not weapons. Anne's story teaches us that big tragedies don't start with violence. They start with ideas, with blame, with lies, with silence. Lesson: never ignore small signs of hate. Speak up when someone is treated unfairly, before it's too late. 4. You can't control the world, but you can control your mind. Anne couldn't go outside. She couldn't speak freely. But inside her diary, her mind was still free. She dreamed, she imagined, she created. Lesson: even when life feels small, your mind can still be big. 5. Believe in goodness, even when it's hard. Anne wrote, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." She had every reason to hate the world, but she chose to believe in love and humanity. Lesson: don't let pain turn your heart cold. Hope is a choice. 6. Words can live longer than life. Anne died before her 16th birthday, but her words became immortal. She didn't survive, but her diary did. Lesson: what you create, your words, your art, your truth, can live far beyond you. 7. Never forget what happened. Anne Frank is not just history. She's a warning, a reminder of what happens when we stay silent, when we close our eyes, when we stop caring. Lesson: remember her not with sadness, but with action. Be kind. Be brave. Be human. This was not just a biography. This was a human story, a child's voice, a lesson for the world. If this story touched your heart, if it helped you understand life, history, and humanity, and if it helped you improve your English while listening, then stay with us. Subscribe, learn, remember. Because stories like Anne Frank's must never be forgotten.